Welcome to this lesson on Plenty by Isobel Dixon. I didn't actually know Isobel Dixon before I started teaching this IGCSE poetry syllabus, but I really love this poem, and I'm not generally into modern poetry that much compared to old poetry. I don't know why. I just always like old poetry. But this one I really, really like, and it surprised me. It's just got some really nice little images and feelings in it, and it really makes you think about the themes. So the main thing that I got from it was the difference between when I was a kid and how I am now on my perspective, which if most of probably the people watching this are going to be teenagers or young adults, and you'll just be at that age where you're starting to have that double perspective. So you'll look back at a phase in your life when you were a child and you're not a child anymore. So you kind of have that how you saw it then versus how you see it now type feeling. And it captures it really well, I think. And also, it's very crucially sort of distinctive about the differences between rich and poor and luxury and poverty, and how if you're in one state, you don't really necessarily understand or appreciate the other. It's quite balanced as well. So, though the poet was in a state of poverty in her childhood, she didn't have a terrible time of it and she wasn't always suffering. There were some things that were very difficult, and her mother particularly found it hard. But there were also moments where she felt really connected to her siblings, or she had like a really nice life because the sort of boundaries she could test with. So she's really fair and honest about her upbringing, and it's not one sided and, oh, I had the worst life ever. It's very subtle and complex the way that she deals with that. So when you analyze this, I want you to be really clear on that it's not just like she's rich now and that's great, and she was poor then and that was terrible. There's a whole variety of experiences that she had when she was poor that she's not able to have now she's rich, and vice versa. So she's looking at kind of a full spectrum of poverty and a full spectrum of luxury, and how those things feel and how they're similar and different. So, firstly, I'm going to read the Oh no, I won't read the poem. Sorry, I'll do the vocab. I always forget that I do the vocab first. Yeah. So we just have a look at some vocab and then I'll read the poem. So, plenty. The word plenty, first of all, it means a lot more than you need. So that's important because it's not just like enough. It's plenty. It's like a bountiful amount, like more than you actually need. So if you had sufficient food, you would have enough food to sustain you. And if you have plenty of food, you have more food than you need. So you can be a bit luxurious with it and eat more of it than strictly need. Grimace, which I really like as a word, it means kind of a smile, but with a painful emotion behind it. So not just like really happy smile. It's like sort of smiling in a sad way or smiling in a pained way, like trying to push through the sadness or to try and kind of suppress the sadness so that you seem happy. It's a really good word for creative writing. So if you're doing English language and you have to do any kind of descriptive or narrative writing, grimace is a good word to write down for that. Sybarite. I had to look up this when I first did this poem because I had no idea what this was. But it's an ancient Greek person who lived in Sybaris, which was considered a really luxurious city in the south of Italy. So Sybarites are pleasure seekers and they live an extravagant lifestyle. So when she says I'm a Sybarite, it means she is in this state of like, you know, enjoying her life and seeking pleasure. She's not just like surviving. She's actually kind of in the lap of luxury at that point. Disgorged means poured out from, but gorge, I really like this word. It's very descriptive and a bit gross. But gorge is like your throat, so it's sort of like almost being sick. But yeah, disgorging, pouring out from the throat. I guess you could say a sound disgorges as well, like it kind of pours out from your mouth. So not necessarily sick. But yeah, this idea of something coming out of a throat. Co-conspirators. So a conspirator is someone who plots about something, kind of like the word conspiracy. And a co-conspirator is someone you're involved in a plot with, so like someone who schemes with you, and usually either you're up to kind of mischief or misdeeds, that kind of thing. See it a lot in like spy films and that type of thing. Co-conspirator. So I'm going to quickly read through the poem now, and I want you to just kind of pick up on things as I'm reading, like any techniques you notice, any images that stand out to you. You should understand the vocab now quite well, and so just focus on the story and what happens, and beyond that, the ideas and the techniques that are being used to express the narrative. Just getting my getting my reading voice on. I always have to pause for a minute and be like, okay, read. When I was young and there were 5 of us, all running riot to my mother's quiet despair, our old enamel tub, age-stained and pocked upon its griffin claws, was never full. Such plenty was too dear in our expanse of drought, where dams leaked dry and windmills stalled, like Mummy's smile. Her lips stretched back and anchored down, in anger at some fault. Of mine, I thought, not knowing then that it was a clasp to keep us all from chaos. She saw it always, snapping locks and straps, the spilling, sums and worries, shopping lists for aspirin, porridge, petrol, bread. Even the toilet paper counted, and each month that was weeks too long. Her mouth, a lid, clamped hard on this. We thought her mean. Skip chores, swipe biscuits. Best of all, when she was out of earshot, stole another precious inch up to our chests. Such lovely sin, lolling luxuriant in secret warmth, disgorged from fat brass taps, our old compliant co-conspirators. Now bubbles lap my chin. I'm a sybarite. The showers a hot cascade and water's plentiful, to excess almost, here. I leave the heating on. And miss my scattered sisters, all those bathroom squabbles, and at last my mother's all those bathroom squabbles, and at last my mother's smile, loosed from the bonds of lean, dry times, and our long childhood. Sorry, I slightly slightly repeated a bit there, but hopefully you get the point. So we're going to look at a proper summary in a minute, but basically she's having a bath and it makes her think about her childhood, and it's not a big deal to have a bath in a warm house now, but it was when she was a kid. So it's kind of interesting. I want you to think about your own experiences of that. Has there been a time where you've had to really, you've had some kind of difficulty like that, like things that you take for granted, you had to actually not take for granted, if you know what I mean. Like when I was a kid, my parents really didn't have much money, and we had the heating turned off. And I remember when I was about 2 or 3, spending a whole winter in bed with my mum and my brother, and we were freezing, and we were just like under the duvet trying to get warm. And obviously now I live in a heated house. I did actually a few years ago live in a completely unheatable house for a totally different reason in a small village, and it was a beautiful house, but it was freezing. And so again, I had this like experience of, you have to be careful about what clothes you wear, and you don't have to like, it doesn't matter what, like how nice they look. It's just about like, do they stop you from freezing and dying kind of thing. So it's interesting, like having more than enough and having less than enough, that distinction. And yeah, if you've had a moment in your life where you've experienced having less than enough, I want you to draw on that when you analyze the poem. And even if you haven't, I want you to draw on your own experience of having more than enough, and how think about things that you take for granted every day that other people might not have. So, like your lighting or your heating or your food or that kind of thing, your lifestyle. So it's really interesting exploring these, and it helps us to understand the situation of different people who are kind of like living in different states of existence. So, a summary then of the story. I've tried to do it as kind of clear as possible because it's a little bit fluid and difficult to kind of get your handle on this poem in terms of how the story goes. It's because it's trying to imitate the flow of memory or it's trying to imitate water flowing. So there are reasons why it's like that, but it does make it's not like a clear-cut story. So the first stanza, there's 5 young children and a mum. There's no father figure, so we don't know if he's absent or he's passed away or what's happened, or even if he's around but he's not involved with the kids as much because he's working. So it's just really unclear about this absent father figure. But there's a lot of children, 5 and a mother. We learn that the family is poor and the mum is struggling. She has to do a lot of maths, which is my nightmare, and worry about money and keep track of things like shopping lists to make sure that they have enough. So she's under a lot of pressure and stress to provide enough nutrition and enough kind of support to her children. Stanza 4 kind of goes through what they buy, and it's all very basic stuff. So petrol, porridge, aspirin, bread, toilet paper. Nothing nice and luxurious there. Although sometimes I really like having porridge and I kind of consider it a luxury. It's not actually, it's very cheap. It's just like I don't eat porridge that much. But yeah, that's by the by. That's just my association. These things are not, they're not like, you know, if you're a super rich millionaire, you probably don't focus on these all day. They're kind of just things you take for granted. Yeah, so there's no butter or organic vegetables or, nothing fancy. Completely stripped back, very, very simple daily essentials, daily necessities. And stanza 5 is interesting because the children react to this, the fact that the mum is very stingy and she doesn't let them, if you go to shopping, like, can I have a lollipop or can I have a bar of chocolate? This kind of mother would have to be like, no, you can't. And obviously, from a child's point of view, that means she's horrid, and maybe your friend at school gets as much chocolate as she wants, and that kind of thing. So the children, from their young perspective, think the mother's a bit mean and harsh. Because they think she's really strict and harsh, they disobey her, they push the boundaries, which is fair enough from their point of view because she seems to be unduly mean. So they steal an extra biscuit or they steal extra water for their baths. And they think this is luxury. They're only allowed to have a bath in water up to a certain level, and they had it a little bit higher than they were allowed. So stanza 7 is a volta. That's a really important structural turning point. And it shifts to present tense. So the tense is really important here. We focus on the poet herself as an adult and how she is now. And she starts to compare back to how she was then. So she's very luxurious in her lifestyle now. And she leaves the heating on and she has long baths. And to me, or to I think the average person, this doesn't seem luxurious to have the heating on or to have a long bath. I have both of those things now. It's the middle of winter, so I kind of rely on those things to have a nice life. Yeah, so she thinks of this as super luxurious relative to her upbringing, but even that probably to a lot of people is just normal. It's not luxurious. So it's all about perspective and your opinion. Finally, we realize that the daughter, the poet who is the daughter at the time, she misses her childhood and her sisters who are scattered. So they've all grown up, moved away, they live in different places, and her mother and the difficult time they shared together. And it's an interesting idea that she misses this difficulty, but hopefully you can sort of see why, because it brought them closer together as a family. It made their lives kind of fun and enjoyable in certain ways that she doesn't have now. So obviously the message is not we should be poor because poor people are happy, but the message is that certain ways of living bring you close together and certain ways of living don't. And so she's grateful for her childhood, and it's not like she wishes she was born rich or she wishes that her mum, um, hadn't been so strict or anything like that. She can appreciate the strictness and she's grateful for her. And as an adult, she actually thinks that she was a really good mum and that she did well with the circumstances. So, an interesting poem, like I say, I really like the ideas of this. I think I can relate, like I was saying, we had times in my family where we were very hard up as a kid, and I was like super close. I still am really, really close to my brother and sister. So, yeah, so I don't know if it's just I click with this poem a lot, but it feels like quite a complex poem to me. So, what we're going to do now is deconstruct different aspects of this poem. So, the first thing to look at is the speaker who is speaking. The speaker is the poet herself, and she's sort of speaking as a child, or she's speaking as an adult looking back on her childhood. And when she first talks about her mum, it's kind of like from the perspective of a child. So when she saw her mum as a child, how she thought about her, if that makes sense. Like she didn't know why she's so mean. And that stanzas 1 to 6. And then when we have that volta, that turning point, it changes. So it goes to kind of a daughter's point of view, but when she's grown up. And then from the point of view of an adult, she can see how she was lucky to have that kind of mother. And there are elements of her childhood that are really comforting, and she sort of misses them. So it's from a very personal point of view, and it's concerned with memory and reflection on the past and a shift in perspective from past to present. We have a lot of complex attitudes expressed here. An attitude is like your opinion on something. So I've kind of normally I don't go into this much detail with attitudes, but if there's a poem that you're confused by or that seems quite difficult to you in terms of like you don't really know what it's trying to say, I recommend focusing on attitudes because that will really get you like to the heart of what the poem is trying to say. So the first point, being poor can be difficult, and we kind of get an experience of some of these difficulties through the imagery of the poem. The second one is that it's not really an attitude exactly, but when you have a strict figure in charge and there's a group of you, you might be aware of this as a student if you're at school. If you've got like a really strict teacher or something, it's almost fun to have a go at them or to try and subtly undermine their authority. And yeah, you see this dynamic in schools all the time. It's just a natural way that humans are, I think. Like if they have too much of a strict environment, they want to kind of rebel against that, especially as a teenager when you're trying to find your identity and your sense of self. It's almost like a healthy relationship that you have with teachers. I try really hard not to be that kind of teacher that people want to rebel against because I was kind of like that rebellious student when I was younger. So not to teachers actually, I was really nice to teachers, but just generally, I was quite like a feisty character as a teenager. So I don't really like. I can't. It's kind of hypocritical if I'm like, oh, kids shouldn't be like that because some people are. So yeah, so they form an alliance against the mother, but it's sort of playful. Like they're not mean to her back. It's not a harsh kind of really rebellious environment where they just reject her and everything that she stands for. They just sort of push the boundaries of what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. So if they're meant to take one biscuit, they might take two. If they're meant to have the bath up to a certain level, they might steal a bit of water and make it a bit deeper. So it's playful resistance rather than serious resistance. This one we've kind of talked about already. So she was poor and she had limited supply of food and limited access to luxurious or pleasurable experiences. So in some ways that's kind of sad because she didn't have as much as some people have. But in other ways it's actually quite positive because she really like I don't know what the word is. She really like cherished. Sorry if you can hear my dog, he's going a bit mental in the background. Don't know, hopefully it doesn't come up on the mic. Um, what was I saying? Yeah, she cherished the times that she did have. So like these few things she did that she considered luxuries, they meant a lot to her and she really, really kind of appreciated those. So we shouldn't necessarily feel sorry for her and look down on her because she was poor. She did enjoy her childhood. But we do get the message that we should appreciate and be thankful for what we have. So no matter how rich or poor you are, there will be things that you have that other people don't have. Obviously, if you're rich, you probably have more of those. If you're in the middle, again, there'll be things that you have, things you don't have. So I think it's about rather than fixating on, like, oh, my friend has the latest PS5 that's coming out soon, or a giant a TV than me, or my cousins are always on holiday having a great time. Those kinds of thoughts that we have, like where we're comparing ourselves to other people, they're not necessarily very useful for like building our character or for having a strong sense of self. And instead, we should think about, oh, do you remember that time where, like I was saying with me, like the time where all um, my parents' like bills got cut off, and then there was no electricity and no water and stuff, and we had to spend winter in a bed. In a way, that's pretty bad, but in a way, that's good because I ended up really close to my brother, and um, it's kind of like this really personal memory that helped form my character. So it's that type of thing. You want to like delve into experiences in your past that were sort of hardships and try and find the positives in them. And you want to be aware of experiences in your present that are luxuries. Like I'm trying to think of a luxury now that I have. It's difficult. It's not really difficult. I do have like loads of stuff I do now. I bought like a smoothie maker this year, and instead of me panicking about what to have for breakfast every day, now I just have smoothies. And it's really good for me because I eat way more fruit than I used to. And it's nice because I look forward to them in the morning, and I used to hate breakfast and skip it mostly. So to me, that's a luxury having a smoothie maker. They're not like a basic thing that everyone has. Um, but it makes a huge difference to my day, and it makes a difference to the enjoyment of like my food and my health and my nutrition. So I'm super grateful for that. Even though it's a tiny thing, it's not like I go on holiday to Jamaica every summer or something. Although that would be nice as well. But yeah, that type of thing. Even if you like, do this exercise and pause and think about it. The main thing with all poems is like find a way to connect to the ideas of them and to compare your own experience to what's being expressed, because when you can kind of really get into a poem that way, it makes you feel like close to the ideas, and then it makes you feel kind of more confident with your voice in an essay. So it makes a huge difference to your analysis. Like I can totally tell when I'm marking essays, people who've like not really got the poem, even if they work super hard on trying to understand it, they might just not click with it personally. So they analyze at quite a distance. Whereas people who really click with it, even if they've not studied it as much as someone else, they'll like really get inside the ideas and probably have some insights and personal feelings there. And you need the personal feelings for your A star grades. You need to have a personal kind of connection to what you're reading. So we've kind of covered this one. Being poor can be fun as it brings people together. We've covered this one. When we're old, we realize that we maybe didn't understand something important in our childhood, and we look back and realize the significance of it. The daughter misses the squabbles. The squabbles, like, which is like little fights, like not serious fights, it's interesting because they're a form of entertainment in themselves. It's a way that they keep themselves engaged and entertained. It's a bonding experience for the family and a way to create identity, as I said before. Finally, when the finally, when the poet is mature, she realizes that the strictness was because of being a good mother, trying to protect the family and make sure that they had enough to live. So her attitude changes, and it's very important to be sensitive to and aware of changes in your essays. So instead of it just being like all the same idea, there's that volta, that turning point at stanza 7, and there's this shift in attitude towards the mum being actually, she thinks as an adult, my mum was right to do that, and I really appreciate it. Whereas a kid, she thinks, my mum's really mean and stingy. So we're going to have a quick look at language features and techniques now, so structure form techniques. And this is just a sort of introduction to those, so you want to definitely spend longer and go deeper into these. So that the lessons don't end up too long. I always just give you like a few language features rather than everything. But when I was revising, I did actually used to write almost everything I could think of in terms of language features on my poems. So I recommend you do that as well. So we have a few here. Running riot, the alliteration is a strong image of the children being kind of chaotic and running all over the place. The alliteration kind of makes that image stand out, so it's stronger. Dams leaked dry, again alliteration, and windmills stalled. This is strong visual imagery, so it's a very clear image. They're countryside images, so maybe she lived in the countryside. We don't know for sure. But there's this idea of a lack of energy or a lack of basic elements. So the dam is water, and that's dry. Windmills is air, and that's the windmills aren't working, they're stalling, meaning they're stopping. So there's not enough kind of energy to sort of fuel their lifestyle. There was a clasp to keep us all from chaos. So she's talking about the smile. The smile is a clasp. That's something that closes tightly and it keeps them from chaos. So in this case, chaos represents actual real hardship, like to the point where they're not playing and having fun and stealing a biscuit. They're actually genuinely starving and struggling and not having an enjoyable time of it. And she's appreciative that their poverty or their kind of tough times didn't descend that far. And they realize that the smile is a kind of a sense of restriction or restraint there. It's a metaphor being used. Anger, just as a word, it's emotive language. It conjures a strong emotion. And it shows the reaction of the mother to the difficult time, suggests that even if the kids were enjoying it, she was suffering so that they could enjoy it. So it makes you appreciate her character. It suggests she's got a powerful character as well. She's not just like sad and upset by her situation, but she's kind of using anger to kind of, motivate her and help their family through the hard times. I really love this phrase, warmth disgorged from fat brass taps. There's a lot of analysis there, so feel free to kind of go through that. You can pause and read it, or you can print out the document or download the document because I always upload these to the Scribbly pages anyway. But yeah, warmth and then enjambement, so it goes across the line, disgorged. Kind of feels like it's pouring out, like it's a sense of pouring. And this word disgorged that we were talking about earlier and all of the feeling associated with that word. Fat brass taps is assonant, so hopefully when I read it earlier you noticed that the A sound is continuing there. It depends on your accent, so you might say fat brass taps, in which case it doesn't work so well. So if you've got like a slight northern accent like I have, you'll say fat brass taps, and that feels like more of a strong image. So perhaps the poet is also northern and that's her accent coming through. Be interesting to know actually. So a couple of structure form points then. Dashes. There's a lot of dashes and they create a pause in the flow of the poem. Sometimes they stop the flow of images. It feels a bit kind of choppy, like chopped up, a bit like how memories are. Like there are gaps in your memory if you try and think of your childhood. You might see the way I visualize stuff in my memory anyway is a bit like a film. So I'll remember like a scene basically from my life, as if like my whole life's a TV show or something, which it kind of feels like it is sometimes, to be fair. So probably that's why. But yeah, I remember like a whole scene or like a whole section of something plays out, but then obviously before that and after that there was something I did and I don't know what, or I went somewhere. So these dashes are like these gaps in memory or these gaps in the flow of the ideas and the feelings that she's got associated with this memory. This is the best bit with a dash, I think, where it goes across stanzas, so it has this double jump, which is indicated by a double slash when you're writing it in an essay. So one slash means there's a line break, and a double slash means stanza break. So at some fault, double slash of mine. So it shows kind of confusion and pause, and it makes you think about like faults and problems. And then it shows you that the the child version of this poet actually thought she was causing the problem. So she was angry at her mum because she thought her mum was angry at her, and she didn't realize it was to do with their life outside of that and the struggle that they had. The Volta I've gone on about loads anyway, so you feel free to have a look more into that. And finally, for structure, the poem is in free verse. This means it's like no set structure form. So um, there are quatrains, which mean they're 4-line stanzas. So it has a kind of regularity, but then within that, the line length is irregular. So some lines are long, some are short, and there's no set rhyme scheme. So it has a little bit of structure, but it's very free within that and loose. And perhaps it's to do with like the fluidity of water or the fluidity of memory. Um, Maybe the half structure. So it's like she's kind of half tried to structure it. If we go back, I'll show you how it looks again. So we do have like, 4 lines per stanza, but then it's quite erratic. It's kind of long and short, and it gets a bit shorter towards the end. Then it goes kind of random in that second to last stanza. So it's like a difference between kind of restraint and chaos, which I think is one of the points in the poem. Like she's going back and forth between, um, the time where it was like really difficult and the time now, and the time where her mum tried to impose some order on this very chaotic situation. The difference between, restraint and chaos, and also memory. So I've not actually done context for this one, but depending on your exam board, you might need a bit of context. So double check with your teacher about that, or have a look on the exam website kind of page. And if you really can't find whether you need context or not and you're not sure, send me a message and I'll look it up and I'll maybe add it to the end of this lesson if it's something that people are really interested in. Generally, for GCSE, context is not so important for poetry because you do so many different poems by different people. So, so skip the context on this one. So we'll just have a look at these themes as a final thing for today. So, poverty, luxury, parenting, pushing boundaries, difficulty, and childhood. This is kind of like a summary of what we've been talking about in the lesson. So I'm not going to go into what it says here because it'll be repeating myself. I want you to have a think about the thematic statements on each theme. So the message. What message is she sending about poverty and luxury? What message is she sending about parenting? So what are her opinions as a poet on all of these themes? And then when you write an essay, use that message of each theme to underscore your analysis. So that helps you tile your analysis together, helps you create a good introduction, and it helps you push your ideas further and kind of deeper when you're analysing. So hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. I like this poem as much as I do because I really enjoy it. And thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys soon.